My name is Brenton J. Boyce, and this is Franklin Boulevard Media. My name is Brenton J. Boyce, born here in Gastonia, North Carolina, July 9th, 1981. My childhood in Gastonia, how would I describe it? Went to Gardner Park Elementary School, from there Holbrook Middle School, and then the great Ashbrook High School, home of the Green Waves, the house that James Worthy built, the football field that Calvin Hill built, who else? Junior Hall, all the greats. My cousin Ostel Barnett, all them, so some ballers on the east side of Gastonia, the Green Waves. From there, of course, growing up, I grew up in the Gaston Boys Club, so that was very important. Probably the most monumental thing that happened in my life was my mama letting me go to the Boys Club. So you grow up hooping all day in the game room. What else? Probably a lot of my friends growing up, now I think about it, were attendees of the Gaston Boys Club. So I say Gaston Boys Club because when we first started going, it was just the Boys Club. Later on, it became the Gaston Girls and Boys Club, and that was a monumental change. The Gaston Boys Club, it was run, the executive director was Vernon Perry, Mr. Perry. Mr. Perry is probably one of the most important and influential people in my life because at a young age, he took interest in us, right? Making sure it wasn't just about playing basketball and playing in the game room, but he made sure we were... He made sure he got a hold of our minds to make sure we were getting what we needed educationally. He had us involved in oratorical contests. Oratorical contests everywhere. I was pretty much like a junior Mason called the Night of Pythagoras, and he would have us traveling, and we would attend these conferences, statewide conferences, and we would partake in oratorical contests. And what's weird, I went, years later, I attended A&T, and one of my line brothers, I'm an Omega, actually was like the state president at the time. We were about the same age, and 20 years later, now we're line brothers at A&T, or not quite 20 years, but so it was weird how everything came full circle. But Mr. Perry was super important. Mr. Perry, then I call him the 3 Ps. We had Perry, Mr. Partlow, George Partlow, Warren Perkins, God rest his soul. What I remember the most about the Boys Club, and of course, being from Gastonia, everybody knows about James Worthy and Sleepy Floyd. So when you walked in James Worthy in particular was an alum of the Gaston Boys Club. So he was probably one of Mr. Perry's earliest proteges. So at this time, when I started going to the Boys Club, I was probably 6. So this is like 87. So this is when the Lakers were like balling. So this was at the height of the Lakers, the Showtime Lakers. And I remember when you walked into the Boys Club, of course, it was a sign-in desk. And when you signed in at the desk, like behind the desk, it was a poster of James Worthy on the wall. He wore New Balance, so it was his New Balance poster. And it was like Black Jesus. So you see him, and it's like, oh, that's James, And then when they came back for the first Highland Festival in 1989, I remember seeing him and Sleepy in person. It was like, Charlie Murphy when he described Rick James, and was it Rick James when he had the orange aura about him? That's how it was seeing James and Sleepy. It's like they had a glow. It's like, that's James and Sleepy. They were already tall, so it's like you see him as a little boy. It's like, wow, so... those are 2 inspirations as well. Knowing people, my aunt went to high school with Sleepy, and other cousins that went to high school with James. It's like, wow, that made me feel like I could be something, right? So they don't know it, of course, but they were very important to me, both of them. So I had great influences coming up in Gastonia. And I think that's pretty much every child that's grown during our era, maybe born in the late 70s, early 80s, can attest to James Worthy and Sleepy Floyd being their heroes. So I decided I wanted to study law probably about 7th or 8th grade. Part of it was I was always kind of defiant as a kid. I was the principal's office regular, right? If I saw something I didn't like, I spoke out on it. Of course, that means I, had to get handled, right? So that's just how I was. I always fought. I didn't like seeing people done wrong. So it was always something in me. My mom was that way as well. So my mom was always wondering why I got in trouble every day, but I was acting like her. But so I was being defiant like my mama. But I just like to stick up for people. So if I saw something that wasn't right, even if it was an authority figure, I would say something, and I would be in the wrong as a kid. A kid has to have his place, but I was always that type of kid. So growing up, actually, even though he's not an attorney, Jesse Jackson, watching him run for president and watching a vocal black male on TV, that was, it made me say, I want to stand up for people one day. I like the way he's, standing up for people. Then probably when I was around 8th grade, that was the O.J. Simpson trial. And so everyone knows that's the first trial that, the first celebrity trial that kind of broke TV, right? Your grandmama couldn't watch the stories because O.J. Simpson on. So I watched that every day. And I think Johnny Cochran, when he said, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit. And that was the coolest ever. He was a smooth operator. And I said, I want to do that. So I got interested in civics and stuff like that in middle school or junior high. And from there, I decided I want to be a lawyer right there at that moment. And for everything I did from then on out was to be a lawyer. I attended North Carolina A&T. Parents dropped me off in 1999, and that's where I essentially became an adult. So when those hard times when you pay your first, that place you live when you pay rent on your own the first time, that place is always gonna hold a special place in your heart. So literally that is where I became an adult. That's where I matured. I had the hard times of being a broke college student living on my own. And that's where that's where the umbilical cord was cut. So for me, Greensboro was always important because of that. And I think, the rearing I had here in Gastonia helped me. It kind of gave me what I needed to be all right when it came time to start becoming an adult in Greensboro. So that's why I stayed there. So I literally school, and even when I started practicing law, before I started practicing law, I graduated from A&T. I interned with attorney Charles Blackman. So he gave me an opportunity. So I started, that's where I got my introduction to the professional side, actually practicing law. So I interned in the summers. I would go back to Central, then come back in the summers. So Greensboro was literally like where I became an adult. So that's why it's, and so special to me. What got me to A&T, right? So, my mom, Brenda Boyce, she gonna try to, and my dad, they're gonna try to save some money. So, I was getting my scholarship applications out. Actually, the first place I applied to was Morehouse, and Morehouse had this thick, application packet. You had to write an essay. And I wrote the essay. I got English teachers to check it, and I was like, this essay got to be perfect. Sent it off. I kissed the envelope when I put it in the mail, right? And probably about a month later, so it might have not even been that long, but they sent me something back saying, we're sorry to inform you that we've misplaced your application. Like, we don't know what happened. Can you please do that again? At that point, I'm like, nah, I'm like, no, absolutely not. I just worked my behind off. Another person who's very important, Ken Frontenberger. He was the guidance counselor at Ashbrook. He was particularly the guidance counselor for the student athletes when I was there. So he, of course, being a family friend, he would always call me in the office. Like, I think I was in trouble. Like, what'd I do? No, Mr. Frontenberger wants you. You go in there. He's like, son, what you doing? Get on your SAT. What you up to? So he would make sure you were on top of things. He made sure you knew what the deadlines were. This time in particular, he said, because he attended Central. I remember going to his office, and he had the Central flag, the banner, and the pennant on his wall, because I believe North Carolina Central, they actually won the Division II National Championship in like 88 or 89. So I remember walking into his office, and he always had that pennant up. And at that time, of course, I didn't know where I would go to school. I knew, of course, my brother Kip was at A&T. My oldest brother, Roderick, he had graduated from ECU. So I didn't know. So I was literally... he would call me in the office, but he told me this particular time, he said, A&T is coming. They're going to be in the back of the cafeteria. They're having an Aggie night, so you might want to go talk to them. So sure enough, at the back of the cafeteria at Ashbrook, you're a Green Wave, you know how the cafeteria is. So they were back there, and they had the little cardboard cutout and stuff set up. And I was talking to the lady. I was like, hey, my brother, went to A&T. We're talking. And she was like, well, come to we have our Aggie night tonight at the Gastonia Country Club. So come out. So as a matter of fact, this is your, you can do this admissions application. Go to your guidance counselor, get what you need, get your SAT scores. I'd already taken the SATs. and get an official transcript from your guidance counselor and bring that with you tonight. I'm like, okay. Didn't think anything of it, so I got right on it. And my mom and myself, we went to the event and gave them the packet, and we were just walking and talking, and who was there? Dr. Simmons, Ralph Brown was there. They had a traveling Aggie team, where they were recruiting. So I remember getting some questionnaires over the summer and going to college events, and I always heard that, of course, to be a lawyer, you would need to, a good major. What most lawyers major in is political science. So I was thinking all political science, right? So I met Dr. Michael Simmons, who was the chair of the econ department, and he happened to be at that event. And I was talking to him, and while we were talking, at that point, some lady said, I can't remember her name. She said, "Congratulations to our newest Aggie," and it made it a big fanfare. And I'm like, "Who they talking about?" Brenton Boyce. I was like, "Oh," so I literally got accepted right there that night. So they took my application, reviewed it. It's like, "Oh yeah, he's good." So I was like, wow. Me and my mom were looking at each other like, "Oh man." So at that point, I still hadn't made a decision, but I was like, well, I'm gonna follow my brother's footsteps, A&T. I was up there with them all the time. Loved the marching band, and loved going to football games. So literally, I was like, wow, I think I'm gonna go to T. So, but I didn't know for sure at that point. So at this point, I'm having a conversation with Dr. Simmons, and he says, you should change your major. You don't have to be a political scientist to go to law school. He says, as a matter of fact, law is becoming more and more corporate, business stuff going on. There's a whole sector of law called business law. He said, you should change your major to economics. And I was like, I'll think about, And he said, well, I'm offering you a scholarship. So at that point, my mom stopped. She's like, scholarship? We talking money? So at that point, I don't think I had a choice. So one thing about my mama, we were allowed to make some choices, but there was not very much flexibility. If Brenda said you were going to do it, that's what you were going to do. So she's like, oh, you're going to A&T and you got a scholarship. So at that point, I was like, Aggie pride. So at that point, I knew I was going to A&T, majored in economics, did pretty well under scholarship, and got more and more scholarships every year to the point where it didn't cost me anything by the end. So right now, I'm a practicing attorney in Greensboro, North Carolina. Have my own law firm, the law offices of Brenton J. Boyce, downtown Greensboro, right on Green Street, right there in the middle of the heart of everything, just a stone's throw from the courthouse, like a 2-minute walk. And so I've been doing that now since 2013. So now I'm about 9 years in. So that was probably the gutsiest decision I ever made, and that was to hang my own shit. In law we call it hanging a shingle, when you essentially putting a sign up when you're doing your own practice. So probably the gutsiest thing I've ever done, because it was a risk. If you're an entrepreneur, anything you do that's entrepreneurial, especially when your income is only hinged on that, is a risk. Like if I had failed, I might be living on the street or something like that. So I did it with no money. So I never took out a loan. So I don't owe anybody any money. I had pretty much family gathered up money. I said, hey, I'm about to partake in this thing, and I need a little bit of help. And I started getting clients, and it picked up. And that was in 2013. I was scared the whole time, but I was also courageous. And I did that, and at this point now, that was 9 years ago, and I'm doing well. I pay my employees every other week. Rent's been paid, and I'm doing well. I represent people, so I'm enjoying that. But now I'm trying to transition my career back into public service, and I'm aspiring to ascend to the office of district attorney in Guilford County. So I've always been a part of the community. Part of my career as a lawyer, I was a public defender. So you can't be a public defender and not be a part of the community, because you're representing the people that really need to be represented, those underserved parts of society, right? So I've always had a soft spot for that. When you work on the criminal court side of law in general, you're going to see the disparities. And I saw the unfairness in how certain people, just because of what side of town they were from, the fact that they didn't have the resources that certain other people did, right? And it was definitely almost like the game was almost set. Like the rules were being made by the people. It's like the rules were changing, and the goalposts was kind of being moved And I realized that when you work in as a public defender and doing court-appointed criminal work, you see that all the time. A lot of people are in trouble, and it's pretty much only because they lack the resources. So I wanted to do something that would allow me to kind of maybe do away with that disparity and make sure the courthouse would be fair for everyone. I wanted to serve as a court-appointed attorney, representing indigent clients. It made me realize that maybe there was a better way to be of service, right? And the number one way to do that would be serving as district attorney, kind of having the pulse of the community. I think that's the best way to be a servant of the people, because that office is essentially that they are the attorney of the people, and they serve the needs of the people. And I just feel like I would be great for that, being that I have a career of serving the underserved. So that's why I definitely, that took a lot of praying. Of course, my wife, we talked about it. So, for me to do something like that, I would directly be pulling my wife in, right? So that's something you got to talk to your spouse about, stuff like that. And there's another thing, I got to mention my wife, Crystal Boyce. That's another important decision I made. So I definitely dated up with that one. So I definitely am outside of my league. But I'm glad she said yes. But definitely you got to take certain decisions like that home to make sure it's going to be fine with the house, right? So did that, and she's fine with it. So we're going to take this journey together. So I think we're going to be all right. What am I excited about and what I see in the future for Gastonia? The future is wide open, and I actually like the direction that Gastonia is going in. I feel like Gastonia at this point in time is more inclusive probably than it's been in a long time. It's like culturally inclusive. So you have the Fuse Center, which is awesome. The complex, that's awesome. Visited that with the baseball team. Also, just what's going on. I feel like even the students in high school here are exposed to way more than we were exposed to. They have way more resources than we had. So just seeing what even the young students from high school, because I also teach it in North Carolina A&T as well. So I've been teaching at A&T for the last 10 years. So here and there, I'll actually have a Gastonia kid in my class. It's weird. I'm like, one, I won't say her name, but she walked into class one day, and we were probably like midway through the semester. And I'm teaching, and she walks in, and she has on a pink hoodie, and it has the A, the block style A. And you see that, I'm like, that's Ashbrook? And I said, hey, what's that on your hoodie? And she does. I said, where you from? And she said, Gastonia. I said, yeah, hold on, how did I not know that? I thought I said that day one, because I'm so proud of Gastonia. Everybody knows that at some point in time, Brenton Boyce gonna tell you he's from the gas house. So so I even say that in every class when I introduce myself. But I thought, there was never the connection until that moment. I was like, you sit tight, and we gonna talk after class. So we talked. I realized who she was, and actually know her people. It's crazy. We might even be kin. That's one thing about Gastonia. A lot of folks, and you got cousins. So realize we might be kin. But definitely, even in that capacity, and even where I am all the way in Greensboro, working at A&T and practicing law, I still get to help Gastonia people. But back to the question, I see Gastonia growing, and because I see the young people having access to way more than we had access to. And it's not just because of Charlotte. Of course, Charlotte is being right here, right under the shadow of Mecklenburg County or Charlotte. As Charlotte grows, we grow, of course, as a suburb of Charlotte. But I think we're growing on our own. I think it's not just the fact that Charlotte is growing. I believe Gastonia is growing because of decisions that Gastonia is making, right? So it's not just about, you're just growing because Charlotte's expanding and people are living in people that don't want to pay those high taxes move to Gastonia or Belmont or something like that. I think it's honestly, we have cultural change. There's certain things that we didn't have, right? Back when I was around, when I was coming up. So I think Gastonia is actually an awesome city right now as it is, but it's going to be way better. For year by year, it's like there's something else. I come home and there's something different, right? To the point you come home like, hold on, this was there last time. This was woods the last time I was here. That's a house now. Oh, that's a whole building, executive suite. It's like all that stuff is happening. You leave for a few months and come back, and and you come back and things are different. And even though I'm not living in Gastonia right now because my family's here, my parents still live here, I'm literally home probably twice a month, if not more than that. So I'm here all the time. So if there's anything going on in Gastonia, any way I can be a resource, I'm here. So I never wanted to be one of those people that left Gastonia and didn't give anything back, right? So I give back. I like being here. If there's an event, of course, I like attending high school football games. It had been a while since I've been to an Ashbrook football game. It was good to go to one. Now, they didn't win. I was mad about that. But, the Green Wave are coming back. But yeah, it was great. It's just great to be in the atmosphere and to see how much things have changed, because it's growing. We got more high schools here right now, so things are growing. So, that actually is making the high schools, population-wise smaller, which is, for us in the old school playing football, we all, Ashbrook was just big monolith, and then Huss was on the west side of town, and it was huge, right? So you had these two 4A schools in the same city that were bitter rivals, but now you have more, what's that, you got Forest View, you got Stuart Kramer, all these other schools. So the old school people look at like, man, it's too many schools. What about, I want it to be Ashbrook versus Huss, and that's it, because, Ashbrook versus Huss used to literally close town down. Like, if Ashbrook and Huss were playing in basketball or football, you couldn't find a convenience store that was open because everybody was at the game. But now, that was a good thing, but I think with more schools, I think with smaller class sizes, I think our students are getting more individualized attention. I think so. The city's growing for one, and the county's growing. So with that, you have to have more schools. So I think it's a good thing. I think having options and having all this stuff going on is awesome, especially education. I love my hometown. I love Gastonia. I shout its praises everywhere I go. Everyone that knows me, they say, yeah, what you know about Boyce? They're gonna say he's from Gastonia. So I represent it proudly. I want to be that beacon. I want to be able to be an example, like the Vernon Perrys, the George Partlows, the James Worthies, the Sleepy Floyds. I won't be, even though I'm not a professional athlete, but I want to be an example. I want children and family members, I want them to be able to look at me and say, hey, Brent is doing what he's doing and I can do it too, right? So from the Gas House. So that's my thing.